Hello students, Mr. Greg here. I hope you are doing well. Today I've got a pretty cool lesson for us. It won't be real long, but it's definitely important that you understand it. Today I'm going to teach you how to connect the LCD and program it to run. We're going to explain a little bit about how it works and what we need to do. And this lesson will be the beginning of several lessons that are going to build on each other. And so it's important that we get this right. So pay close attention and let's have some fun. So you see on the screen here, I have the LCD. So I need you to get that out of your kit as well as your potentiometer. You remember our friend, the potentiometer with the little connector. And we need to get both of those out because that's what we're going to use to hook it up. The potentiometer we're going to use to adjust the brightness of the LCD. And so I'm going to show you the connection diagram and so you can see it and understand how to connect the wires in case you get a little bit behind. But my connection diagram isn't drawn like my picture here. And so I want you to set your LCD up on the breadboard like I have it here. And so I've got it probably starting right about, you probably can't read that. This is row 10, or column 10. This is column 10, and so I've left some space here for a reason. And I need you to leave that space also. And then just plug it in. You can see I've actually plugged the pins in south below this ridge here. And I did that for a reason also. And then my potentiometer is relatively close like this. And if you remember correctly, the potentiometer has 3 pins on it, 3 pins. All right, this one is the wiper pin, or the one that varies the resistance to the circuit, and then one of these pins is the positive input, and one is the ground. And so we want to hook it where the 2 pins are facing away from the LCD, and the 1 pin is here on the back like that. So that's the way you need to get your LCD and your potentiometer placed on your breadboard. I'm going to show you the diagram now. You can pause if you'd like just to take a look at it to get familiar. As you can see, there's a lot of connections to be made on this LCD, and we've got to make sure we connect them correctly or it won't work. And so I'm going to go through that with you, but I wanted you to see this and have it. And so pause it, take a look at it, and then really probably this time you should follow along with me a little bit as we go. Maybe rewind, go back, look at it again, and so forth. So another thing I've done is I've actually are going to use these breadboard connectors that look like this. I bought a package of these, and the reason why I'm going to use those is I think it'll be easier for you to see my connections, because there are so many connections on video. It's going to look like a bird's nest. But don't worry, you don't need those. Just use the connecting wires that came in the kit, and just make sure you keep track of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up the potentiometer. And basically what I'm going to do is hook the positive, which is the, if I can grab one of these, which is the left, if you're looking down on it, is the left pin of the potentiometer, like that. And then I'm going to hook the negative which is the right one, like that, because I'm going to make a ground rail from my Arduino, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And so you can see it's marked with, this is old hat for you experienced students, but you can see it's marked negative and positive. So I'm going to make the negative my ground rail. I'm actually going to do it right here, like that. I like to use the black wires when I can for the ground wires, and then I'm going to hook my 5-volt power to the positive rail, like that. In fact, I'm going to do that over here. Hopefully keep this neat where you can see it like that. All right. So far we've got the potentiometer hooked power and ground, and we've got the Arduino hooked power and ground. In fact, I'm going to unhook my, oops, that was the wrong one. I'm going to unhook not my camera, my Arduino, and power it down just so there's no accidents. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my diagram, and I'm just going to go left to right to try to keep it consistent and keep me from making mistakes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook the ground of the LCD to my ground rail, and I'm going to use one of these pins. So the ground is actually marked K on our LCD here. Don't ask me why. And I'm going to hook that right there to my ground rail, just like that. And then A is a power rail, and I'm going to hook A, oh, that's not good, to my power. Unfortunately, there's no black ones of these, but I thought it was better. Looks a lot neater, doesn't it? Can you see that? All right, so the first one all the way to your left is the ground. So I hook that to the ground. The second one, going from the left to right, is a power. So I've hooked that. Now the next four, they're labeled D7, D6, D5, and D4, all go to pins on our Arduino. And I've got those hooked to 12, 11, 10, and 9 respectively. And so I'm going to go ahead and hook those up, and I encourage you to do the same. So D7 I'm hooking to 12, like that. D6 I'm hooking to 11, like that. D5 is not wanting to cooperate. D5 I'm hooking to 10, like that. And then 9 I'm hooking to D3, just like that. So I hope you can see that. I think you can see that pretty well. I might zoom us in a little bit here. So you can see that a little bit better. All right, so your connections should look like mine, even though you're using the regular wires. You should be able to keep up with it. All right, so on my connection diagram, the next 4 pins we're not going to use for our demonstration here. And so I'm going to skip those, and I'm going to go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to all the way to the right pin now. I'm going to go right to left because I think it'll be easier for you to follow. So the far right pin is another ground pin. And let's see what I can do with that. Far right pin says VSS. Make sure that is a ground pin. It is. So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to hook it to ground, and we'll make sure I get that right. So I'm being pretty deliberate with this, but it's important you hook it up correctly. And so I want you to follow along. It's also important that you don't knock your potentiometer over. Okay, all right, so there is that. And then the next one, again going from right to left, is another positive power. And I'm going to get a different one out for that. And man, I used an orange one there. I hate to do that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a gray one for my negative. You don't want to change yours. Sometimes, I mean, you find this hard to believe, but I make it up as I go. All right. So that to the negative rail. The next one to the positive rail. There. All right. Excellent. All right. So the third pin from the right actually goes to our potentiometer pin, wiper pin on the back. And that's the output for the variable resistant. I don't like the way this is in here. There we go. And it goes to the third pin. And I've got it drawn as a yellow wire, and I went ahead and used a yellow wire here. So hopefully that'll help you. And then the fourth pin needs to go to our Arduino. And so I'm going to hook that. I think I'm using one of these other. And I'm going to hook that to pin number 2. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4th pin goes to pin number 2. Okay, like that. All right, so you can see that. All right, the 5th pin is another ground. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to use to be consistent. I'm going to use one of these small brown ones. Oops. To represent that. And there it is. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th pin goes to ground. And then our final connection, our 6th pin from the right, I have in the diagram going to pin number 4, but I am going to call an audible and hook that to pin number 3. So I'm sure you can handle that audible change, and you will be able to help me overcome something I realized in lesson number 5 that I had done. All right, so there we go. There's the hookup, and I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little further. You can see the pins here. You can see the hookups. These 4 should be empty, and that should be similar to what yours looks like, only yours probably looks more like a bird's nest. But what can you do, right? So now that that is done, I'm going to open up a nice new sketch. And there it is. So let's begin programming. All right, so we learned about libraries last week. And that's libraries. Well, it's going to open up a whole new world for us, because there's a lot of sensors that require libraries, and we now we know how to get them. So that means we're going to be able to do a lot more cool stuff in the future. All right, the library we need now should be downloaded in your IDE. It's one of the standard libraries. But for some reason, if you do not have it, then you can go, just like we did last week, you can go to Tools. It's all right. No, you can go to Sketch, Tool, Include Library, search for it, and install it. But I didn't have to do that, and I don't think you will either, but you never know. So the library that we are looking for is called, you guessed it, Liquid with a capital L, not liquid, Liquid, capital C, crystal, dot H. See how it turned the color we needed it to? And remember, libraries do not require the semicolon after them. So that includes the library. Should download it for the Arduino. Now, we had a lot of connections, right? A lot of different pins, and so we're going to have quite a few variables. And I'm just going to go through these. Our first one was, I'm just going to go from right to left on this. Let me see here. So you can see I'm just going to go from right to left on setting up my variables. And the first one variable pin that we use went to number 2 here. And so that's where I'm going to start with my variables. All right, so having said that, INT, and that is actually the RS pin. It says it on there. And we hook that to pin number 2. And then INT, the EE pin, which is actually the EN pin. I guess they just didn't have enough room to print it on there. We hook that to 3. And then our other pins, our 9, 10, 11, and 12 pins, were labeled D4, not DR, D4. And that was hooked to number 9. And then D5 was hooked to 10. D6 was hooked to 11. And then D7 was hooked to 12. So let's give you a second to catch up, because I know it went pretty fast there. But basically, that lets Arduino know what pins are hooked to the LCD. So using this library, Liquid Crystal, it'll go out there and it'll look for those. So that is the variables we need to hook up now. Now we need to go to our void setup. And let's think about this. When we were looking at the serial monitor on the computer, we set up a serial begin and we set the baud rate. Well, now we don't want to read it off the serial monitor. We want to read it off the LCD. One thing to let you know is that you can't program it to read the serial monitor and the LCD at the same time. The Arduino won't do that. And so we are going to basically do an LCD begin to set up the serial monitor. But before we do that, we have to create LCD as an object. And so I'm going to go back up above the void setup here. See me here. And I am going to put in capital L, not liquid, capital C, crystal. It likes it. It turns the color. And I'm going to declare that object in, I'll call it LCD. And then I'm going to tell it what pins to look for. All right, so it's RS, EN, D4. Make sure you're putting commas in there. D5, D6, and D7. In parentheses, semicolon. So now that sets this object up. We call it LCD, and then we go into the void setup here, and we initialize the LCD. So we say LCD dot begin, right? Now, before we put 9600 in here, and that was the baud rate. So we don't have a baud rate now because we're talking directly to the LCD object. But you have to tell Arduino what kind of LCD object it is. And that is based on the size of the LCD. All right, so in this particular one, this LCD is 2 rows, 1, 2, and 16 columns. And you'll see that more clearly when we turn it on. So it's 2 rows, 16 columns. Now, if you had a bigger one, you may have more rows or even more columns, and you would have to tell Arduino exactly what it was so that it can orient itself to it. So in our case, it's 2 rows, 16 columns, right? But for whatever reason, Arduino IDE likes it the opposite way, and so we'll say it's 16 columns and 2 rows, like that. And now we've initialized the LCD. So what's left, all that's left, is for us to come in here and tell it what to say. All right. So before I do that, I have to set the cursor on my LCD, right? And so the first row, get back up here. The first row, the top row, this is actually upside down, so I'm going to flip it around now. The top row is actually this one. The top row is row 0. The first column is column 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. The second row is row 1. So the first square in this LCD is square 0, 0. And that's where I want to initialize my text. And so I have to tell Arduino how to do that. And the way you do that you type in LCD dot set cursor with a capital C. See, it turns colors, and you want to initialize at 0, 0. Just like that, semicolon. All right. Now, what do we want it to read? So we'll say LCD print, and that's dot LCD. I knew that didn't look right. Dot print. LCD dot print. Parentheses. Quotations. So now we're creating a string that we want to print on the LCD. So let's print Ridge Crest Rocks. All right. So let's download that and see what happens. I'm going to plug mine back in, turn it on, and I'm going to download here. Let's see if it'll download or if I made a mistake. Ah! All right, let's see. Let's move this so you can see it. And there it is. It had some residual from something else I was working on. There it is, Ridge Crest Rocks. That looks pretty good. Now I can adjust that. And you may need to adjust. You can see that's a little too much. You can actually see the squares in here and the columns, and we don't really want to see that, so I'm going to adjust that out a little bit here. My glare's not too good on this thing. There we go. I've also got the little cover on there. That'll probably help. All right, Ridge Crest Rocks. And I hope you can see that. Pretty cool. Yeah. All right. So one thing that's going to be good practice for us, and I'm a little surprised I hadn't had to deal with it here, is sometimes, especially if you get like it's reading data or something and the numbers are changing a lot, you'll get a little bit of flicker in your message. And so you need to put a delay in here. And before I do that, I'm going to come up here and do our good old int dt equals, I think I'll just do about 500. All right, and then I'm going to just put a delay down here because I know from experience as we move forward that that's going to be an issue. So delay dt, there it is, download, and that's really all there is to it. So I want you to just mess around with it. So I want you to put Ridgecrest Rocks in there like I've done. And then I want you to write your name underneath it, right? And to do that, you're going to need to set the cursor again based on what I told you. And so that is your homework. Make sure you copy and paste your program onto Word or something like that, or even the email. Don't send it to me like this because then I have to open it up in Arduino, and oftentimes you all have the same names for the programs, and that causes an issue. So homework will be due next week. Be looking for that, and I hope you have a great night.